it was enough, as we've said, to secure P2, which was the primary objective, but didn't allow us to really secure it in the manner we would have hoped.
Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Akkodis Race Debrief. My name's Olivia and I'm joined by Bradley Lord answering all your questions about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Bradley, first of all, huge congratulations. We secured P2 in the Constructors Championship. How did it feel to secure that result in Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, thank you very much. To be honest, slightly mixed feelings. It was a pretty underwhelming race. We weren't especially quick at any point, so it felt a little bit like we'd limped over the line rather than sort of charging across it, showing our very best form. So that meant on Sunday, immediately post-race, it was a slightly flat feeling, I think, but obviously you've got to take the season in its whole. Got to step back from that individual race and see the full span of the 24, the challenges that we've faced during the year, the difficult moments we've been through, the development missteps we've backed away from, but then also the successful weekends like Canada, like Singapore, like Brazil, that have been real highlights of the season as well. So overall, if we can't be first, then second is the next best, and that's what we managed this year. But obviously our sights are set on going one better in 2026.
Let's dive in a little bit more to the race itself. So both drivers were complaining about the rear of the car during qualifying. Was this due to the setup of the car, or is it more circuit specific?
A little bit of both, to be honest. We'd made some changes overnight Friday into Saturday to try and improve the car's pace on the long run. And as we went through qualifying, as you say, both drivers were mentioning that they couldn't get the rear end really to stick around their laps. So what that means is you're sliding in the early part of the lap. That puts the tyre surface temperatures high and out of what we call the window of sort of peak grip, and that then leaves the car struggling when you get to the very slow corners in sector 3. So Kimi, for example, had a lap in Q1 that would have actually put him 6th on the grid, I think, if he'd have been able to replicate that in Q3, but unfortunately he had two difficult laps with two different approaches and just on both occasions found rear tyres overheating. And then for George again, Q1, Q2 went very smoothly, and then he just didn't feel the grip at the rear of the car in Q3. So it's one of those things that can happen. You obviously see cooling track temperatures through these evening sessions, and as the drivers start pushing harder and harder, they bump into inevitably some of the limitations of the car, and I think that's probably what happened on Saturday evening.
And just to pull a little bit more on George's experience, what happened at the start of the race where it looked like the car almost didn't want to respond to him?
Yeah, it was unfortunate. Both drivers actually made poor starts for slightly different reasons. George just clutch went too deep, and so he just didn't get off the line, and then from there I think got swamped a little bit. Defended position at turn 1, defended through the rest of the lap, but yeah, just a poor getaway, and unfortunately the starts are very manual affairs. It's something that's deliberately left in the hands of the driver, and on this occasion we just, having had many good ones through the season, it was unfortunately a bad one for both of them.
And to Kimi, who started a bit further on the grid than George, similar to where he started in Vegas as well, but why did we decide not to put him on the softs for this race?
So in Vegas, it was clear that the hard tyre could do pretty much the entire race. It's cool conditions in Vegas. The circuit isn't particularly demanding for the tyres, and so we had an opportunity to pull Kimi and give him clear air and then basically let him run to the flag. Now, in Abu Dhabi, it was very obviously not possible to do that. We couldn't have taken the early stop, made the most of the clean air and then run forward. The choices were really between a 1 stop and a 2. We felt the 1 stop was the better option and the better strategy overall, and therefore started on the hard tyre, hoping to run long and make the most of the situation as cars in front of us pitted. As it turned out, the lack of pace plus getting stuck in the dirty air meant that when the leading cars started making their first stops, they actually boxed out very close to Kimi, and he lost even more race time letting the leaders pass, or not so much letting them pass as being overtaken by them and taking the hit that comes with. And so, yeah, I think the strategic decision was the right one. The other option was to do a 2-stop, as some other cars did. Some of those finished ahead of Kimi and some behind. So really the key factor was the lack of pace on Sunday rather than any individual strategy decision.
I know it's probably not the result that he would be happy with, especially for his final race of the 2025 season, but what an amazing last few races that Kimi's had. How encouraging do you think that this is for him going into 2026?
I think it's been incredibly encouraging. Firstly, that he was able to work his way out of the dip that he experienced and we experienced as a team during the summer. That was incredibly important. But then also to show, particularly in Brazil and in Vegas, both the speed that we know he has, the race, and the consistency in the race, but then also the racecraft to hold off Max in Brazil and then Piastri and Leclerc in Vegas. Those were drives of great maturity that belied his young years, but also good indications of the potential that's there to come. So he had 2 frustrating Grand Prix to finish the year, both sort of caught in dirty air and unable to make the headway he would have wanted to. But I think when he sits back and reflects, he'll find loads of points that he wants to improve, but also a really encouraging foundation for 2026.
Oh, I'm sure we can't wait to see what he's got in store for 26. And just lastly on the car, it seemed to have the pace during qualifying, but just didn't have the race pace. What happened?
Looking at it, I think as we do the post-race analysis, and now we have Fred running in Abu Dhabi at the young driver test as well, unpicking some of the changes we made overnight on Friday. It's clear we could have been more aggressive on ride heights. We'd suffered in the long run with some aerodynamic bouncing, that phenomenon that sort of has recurred all the way through this ground effect era of car. And so we'd made changes and lifted the car slightly to mitigate that, because we felt that was hurting the tyres on the long run. I think to some extent in qualifying, the new tyre grip gives you a bit of a sticking plaster, and then it became clear in the race that we could have been more aggressive with the ride height of the car and some of the other setup decisions, and so probably we're just a little conservative in our decision making now. It was enough, as we've said, to secure P2, which was the primary objective, but didn't allow us to really secure it in the manner we would have hoped.
Obviously not the result that we wanted at the race, but I mean, some pretty impressive stats from George. No DNFs this year, and he was the driver that had the most laps raced other than any driver on the grid. How impressive is that?
It's been an amazing season for George. I think comfortably his most impressive in Formula One so far. He's really stepped up into the leadership role within the team, provided just such a reliable and rapid benchmark for us in car development, but then also for Kimi in his driving and his learning as well. So it's been an incredible season. Obviously 2 highlights with the 2 wins that he was able to secure, and he did both of those in very dominant and composed fashion, and really sets himself up for hopefully a really strong, impressive 2026 as well.
I mean, Abu Dhabi, busy race. We had all the family out. Dorian was there, Valtteri, of course, and Fred Bestie, who, as you just touched on a bit before, is going to be staying out to do the testing. What exactly is he going to be doing on Tuesday?
So we've got 2 cars running at the test. We have Fred running the young driver test, and so he'll be working on different development items, and given that the learning is never done, even at the end of 4 seasons of these rules, unpicking and analysing some of the setup changes and maybe the wrong paths we went down at the weekend. And then Kimi is in the mule car, so in the adapted car to simulate the 2026 regulations. People will see some slightly weird and wacky components on there as we try and replicate what next year will be like, and he's primarily evaluating the final spec of tyres for Pirelli for 2026. So really important learning, really important basic understanding for us going into the winter and then into next season.
And going on to that as well, this season's wrapped up, all eyes on 2026. What can you tell us about the 26 car and what our target is going to be really for the coming year?
I think our target for every season is clear, and it becomes clear quite quickly whether or not we're going to be able to achieve that. So, Mercedes Formula One team always is there to compete for world championships, compete for race wins. In terms of the work in the factory, not just here in Brackley, but also in Brixworth, everyone is absolutely flat out at the moment. We are right in the heart of the busiest period for both facilities. The new chassis is making its way around the factory, the engine's on the dyno and in its final stages of development and reliability prove out. So huge project that's going on, because we're changing literally everything that can be changed for next year, from PU to the fuel to the chassis to the ECU to the tyres as well. So a mammoth amount of work, but at this time of year, there's also a fantastic buzz in a Formula One factory. You can feel the excitement as the project starts to go from sort of paper reality to real parts starts to come together. The testing begins. You get the first ideas of whether what we're delivering matches our own targets and ambitions. Then obviously everyone's extremely excited to get to those first tests and be able to start comparing ourselves to the other teams, because no matter what rumours are out there, no matter what speculation is being offered, none of us know where we stand until we start to make proper comparisons on track during testing and then during the opening race weekends.
I mean, there's so many changes that we're going to do. You just touched on that. But how different is F1 going to be next year?
I think that's a really exciting question. As we've said, we're throwing everything up in the air and seeing how it lands. And some aspects of the racing will be quite different. I think at the start of a rule set, you always see lots of diverse interpretations and solutions for the challenges posed by the rules. We saw it back in 2022 with some very, very different bodywork configurations on the top cars, and eventually that converges towards what everybody sees as the optimum point. So I think we can expect very different solutions. I think we can expect quite naturally, differing levels of reliability up and down the field as well. Got the excitement of an 11th team coming in, and that huge challenge for them to get to the grid and then begin racing. But also, I think we'll still see a Formula One, which is very much the sport we all know and love. It will still be the best drivers in the world and the most incredible machines racing flat out, perhaps in a slightly different way with the active aerodynamics and the sort of energy-based push to pass rather than the DRS of old. But it will still be a very pure pinnacle of motorsport that we see next year in Formula One.